let me just draw you guys a simple graph as we begin to take a look at this stuff of what we mean when we talk about supply and demand. And we'll simply look at it from this perspective. We'll look at price or dollars over here, and we'll look at quantity over here, okay, on this axis as we try to draw this thing out, okay? And when we look at supply and demand, we say if we take a look at the law of demand, we have a curve that comes down like this. That's our demand curve. And we're going to find that the demand and supply curves are in opposites of each other. They're in contradiction, creates a conflict, and it's that point of equilibrium that we're always looking for. This is what you're saying with demand. If prices are low, and this is zero, okay, both for quantity and for price, and it's running up the scale. If prices are low, people will demand more, will they not? I mean, just think, it's common sense. The cheaper the price, the more we would demand. If gas prices were to fall, well, we'd probably drive more, would we not? We would demand more. But as prices rise, then demand and quantity drops, does it not? It gets to a point where we say, well, it's too expensive, I'm going to drive less, okay, because of that. Okay, so all we're saying is when we look at demand, the cheaper the price, the more we demand. The higher the price, the less we demand. That's all that curve says. Very, very simple curve. In contradiction to that is a supply curve. And producers are saying, the higher the price, the more I'll supply. And the lower the price, what? The less I'm willing to supply. I've got to make a profit. And therefore, if prices are low, I'm not willing to supply a lot. But boy, when prices go up, I will produce all you want. But that's in the direct competition with the buyer who says, but my demand is the cheaper the price, the more I want, and the more expensive it is, the less I want. And where this line crosses is, I'll put a little E here, that's the point of equilibrium. That's where we do business. That's where we do business, is it not? At that point, we're simply saying, at this price, this quantity, suppliers are willing to supply this quantity, buyers are willing to pay this price. Okay? And that's all we're talking about when we begin to look at supply and demand. Now, what we'll see is there's some things that can cause these curves to shift. And we'll play with that in just a minute as we begin to take a look at it. So if you follow through with a couple of terms here, when we deal with products, in my notes, substitution effect. When prices decrease, buyers will begin to enter the market, will they not? When prices decrease. And the product will be cheaper relative to other goods, and it will be substituted for them. The substitution effect. The income effect is very simple. 4 different things we'll talk about. Normal goods, that's what we all normally buy, is it not? Real simple stuff. Inferior goods, commodities for which demand is negatively related to income. Potatoes. When my income falls, I eat more potatoes, do I not? Because they're cheaper. They're inferior products. Not that they aren't good for you, but they're inferior products to what I might use otherwise. Substitutes. As the price of one thing goes up, I substitute another competitive product for it, do I not? If the price of steak goes up, I eat more hamburger. I can substitute one meat for another. And they move in opposite directions. And then complements, increase in the price for one product will generate a decrease in demand for another. For instance, I used to play tennis. If the cost of tennis rackets goes up, then the demand for tennis balls goes what? Will go down. Because if I can't buy the racket, I can't buy the shoes, the pants, everything that's associated with it. If that one product goes up, then the demand for the things that tie to that product will fall, will it not? Because I'm also having the same thing happen with the other product. Now, let's talk about this elasticity business and shifts in demand and supply. This equilibrium point is not implying that demand is going to shift or supply is going to shift. We can move up and down this line, but this point at which it crosses is the only place that we do business. Now, what they love to do with you in these questions is say, what if the demand curve were to shift to the right? What would cause demand to go up? I'll give you a great example. When Michael Jordan, being a Tar Heel, when Michael Jordan turned pro, And after a few years, he started really becoming an outstanding basketball player. My son wanted a poster of Michael Jordan. Now, you can buy these posters for $3, right? I couldn't find one in any sporting goods store. So I took my son, we rode down to Chapel Hill, and I said, I know they're going to have them in the bookstore, $25, right? $25 for a stinking poster. So I'm not willing to pay that. What caused the price to go up? Increase in what? The demand. The demand curve shifted, right? Because everybody suddenly wants this thing, right? So when that demand curve, if it were to shift to the right, and that's not a straight line, but if this demand curve shifts to the right, and you now put your dotted lines, because what they're going to say is, what's the effect? Well, if people demand more, what happens to price? It goes up, and suppliers are willing to produce more. And if that demand curve shifts to the left, it's just the opposite, is it not? So you just draw it out, and you can see what's going to happen to both price and quantity. Okay?